The men of Rathlin know the faces of their cliffs almost as well as they know the tracks that link their scattered farmhouses set in the sheltered hollows of the island. Even in recent times, the island men have gone over the cliffs to bring wrecked sailors to safety. Their forefathers knew the cliffs better still, when every fistful of soil on the ledges was sown and harvested to feed a far larger population. Now the ledges are the sanctuary of sea brides. Morning brings no busy traffic on the white roads of the island, for through the years its young folk have left home for the sea and lands beyond. It's no new story, this, that an island's life should depend on the old hands like Mrs. Anderson and her husband, Mickey Joe. At breakfast time, and through the whole day, theirs is the traditional life of the island, a life as wholesome as the food they eat, the home-baked fowl of soda bread, fresh churned butter, the fresh-laid eggs, the really fresh-laid eggs. The day ahead is discussed. Mrs. Anderson has a rugged 2 miles to walk to the shop. Mickey Joe is to take out the grubber and the horse. There are still a few farmers who work their land with a horse. But Rathlin is no one-horse place. Tony McCurrig, the younger farmer, starts his day in the saddle of a tractor. For the island carries 9 tractors, a lot for its arable land. On Rathlin, they also take the place of public transport to school, church, lighthouse, and jetty. There's one car, but that's for the use of Mary McQuilkin, district nurse. Her husband, Johnny, works part-time for the Coast Guard Service in a cliff hut looking out to the Atlantic and the Inner Hebrides. Otherwise, he's off with his father to the fishing and the lobsters under the Rathlin cliffs. A fine day for the work ahead of them, one on land and one on the sea. The nurse's car climbs over to the west through the sunshine, and at the sound of her engine, the lark rises into the clear Atlantic air. Life on an island is a clear edge, so long as the island has a life to offer. But existence on any island is twixt and between. The old way of seeing and doing things is not often that of the young. Betwixt and between childhood and maturity, you can long for something other than the familiar hearth to which you are born. You can think of other ways of earning your bread, away from home. Homemade bread is sweet, but there's life to be sampled in the world outside. And although Rathlin farmers have carried their knowledge of livestock to the Dominions, skilled handling of cattle is still the activity that keeps the island going, and sometimes stops the island's traffic. Beef cattle sold to mainland dealers have to be driven over the island roads to the port. And here, at Church Bay, the island farmer's problem really begins. A small jetty and a shallow harbor that won't take anything bigger than a 30-foot open boat. Boats that have to be manhandled down to the water's edge. Men leave their own work to help a neighbor launch the cattle boat. Many an island died when there were not enough men to launch a boat. And when the boat's afloat, it's only the beginning of this business of running the cattle to the mainland. No one, and the island farmer least of all, likes this method of handling his livestock. If the animal's damaged, he's the loser. But for as long as anyone can remember, this is how Rathlin cattle have had to be shipped. And no amount of sympathy or indignation has produced another ounce.
Go ahead.
Well over 100 of these robust hill cattle are transported to mainland buyers every year for fattening. They are difficult to move, but they are a valuable export, essential to the wealth of the island. Six sea miles separate Rathlin from its nearest mainland port. The boats enjoy plain enough sailing, and tides and wind favor them most of the year. Yet in winter, and even in summer, that old sea devil called Malin can make a maelstrom of the channel in a matter of minutes. The seas take command, and Rathlin is cut off. No boat now could enter what's called a harbour at Ballycastle. No cattle could be landed, no man could leave. Communication stops. To understand why this should be, look at the map. The Irish Sea is a broad place, plenty of sea room, as sailors say. The ebb tides move north, and the shores close in, squeezing great waters through the Rathlin Narrows out to the Atlantic. Winds collide headlong with the ebb and raise huge seas that isolate the island. It's this beating of wind and sea that has given Rathlin its physical shape and has formed the temperament of its people and their livelihood to this day. But for all its turbulent waters, Rathlin was a stepping stone between Scotland and Ireland. For generations past, men came to Rathlin from Scotland and the Isles in boats driven by sail and oar to scramble ashore under its cliffs. And the island men sold their produce in Scotland and brought back their brides from Islay and Kintyre. From Scotland also came bishops and kings. Bruce's castle stands on a headland, a few stones cemented by legend. Rathlin is studded with tumble-down places. Years of wind and rain have swept the older derelicts clean as a bone. Men and women lived here, but did not necessarily die here. Lack of land and lack of opportunity drove them away. They were driven off the land they had tilled to the salt sea's edge, and whole families stepped from the edge of these holdings into the emigrant ships that called at the island. People still go, and through a glassless window you can see the discarded relics of the last family. The question is, how long can a place live if its people are drained away? Bill Curry's ancestor, a fisherman, landed in Rathlin in search of fresh water. The woman he spoke to didn't understand him. She spoke Gaelic. But the Currys took to Rathlin, and today Bill is one of the island's most extensive farmers. And Bill doesn't fear that his lands and house will fall into ruin, but he has that most precious of possessions, young sons growing up around him. In fact, one of the odd things is that Rathlin, with a declining population, has more children at the island school than for many years. The school sign is in Gaelic, but inside at their desks and forms, the boys and girls learn the same things as children on the mainland.
And his monthly expenditure, now you may have a bit of trouble with that word.
When Jim Curry left school, he stayed on to work on the family farm. He's part of the answer to Rathlin's problem, one young man who wanted to stay. His father took on more land to graze cattle. With a steady market for their beasts, the farmers have not been content to rely on the free run of island pasturage. By rigorous testing, they're eliminating low-grade stock, and the island's herds are now almost 100% of tested cattle. The vet and the ministry official are regular visitors to the island. Sheep, too, have been brought back to Rathlin. Although it was once known as the Island of Sheep, they've been absent so long that Tony McCoig has to train a young dog to the work.
Come on, bring him in now.
And perhaps it was in those days of large flocks that Rathlin also earned the title of the Island of Gentle Dogs.
That's a good dog. That's the boy. Right, win that out. That's a good dog.
Most of the Rathlin farmers grow beans. Once they were milled on the island, even today they're sold for good money on the mainland. Their high protein content goes into valuable cattle feed, and the island's limestone speckled soil ensures a good fat pod from the beanstalk. Potatoes are the other cash crop. Mechanization and more intensive farming have pushed back the boundaries of the fields won by previous generations from stony slopes and peat bogs. The days when the donkey carried the load. Then the fields were divided into strips and worked by several families. Today, one of the most prosperous and well-worked farms is that of the McMullen family. But there are 4 men in the McMullen house and in the fields. Mr. McMullen and his 3 sons, Sylvie, Peter, and Jamie. big shovel starts a big project, but trees are being brought back. Rathlin was once a wooded island, and you can dig up proof of that from every part. Now, under a government afforestation scheme, the swampy hillsides are being drained and the bare slopes planted out with seedling trees. In a few years, the island heights will be clothed with great horse chestnuts, and farms will be sheltered by the crack willow and the grey alder. All this means more traffic with the mainland. 60 years ago, Marconi sent his first successful radio message from Rathlin. Today, there are 7 telephones linking the island with the post office at Church Bay.
Hello? Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Miss Anderson, the postmistress, is the link with the mainland. It may be a private message, or it may be of general interest, such as the mail boat has left. Whatever boat it is, the news gets round by a system older than radio, and the island prepares for the big occasion. The island boat is home. And as the passengers land, the essentials for an island farm and its kitchen are prepared for unloading. The metal fitting for a window, cement, feeding meals, tractor fuel, clothing, groceries. If you see something for your neighbor, you take that too and drop it in as you pass. Of course, there's a son or daughter home for a spell, and they'd be bringing with them the fresh meat ordered from the butchers, the high tea that'll celebrate the visit. For Dan McQuilkin, the fisherman, and his son Johnny, the day's work is over. The last lobster lifted off the Bull Point light is ready for the stock box. From here, it's a short run to the landing place and their evening meal. And at Clockenbow, the Bull Point, where the lighthouse hangs on the face of the cliff rather than standing on the edge, the watches are being changed. The great lenses revolve in their mercury bath, while burners and fuel feeds are checked for the dark Atlantic night ahead. Satisfied that all's well, Principal Keeper Freddie James climbs down to meet his relief, Keeper Paddy King. For a lighthouse keeper, Rathlin's by no means unpleasant. It's a bachelor existence at Bull Point, but Mr. James's family are only 4 miles away at the main station. And Paddy Kane, who has had his spells on isolated rocks, can take a bike run over green hills any time he pleases, when he's not on watch. There are 3 lights on Rathlin, but many vessels have ended on the black rocks running out to sea. In the island graveyard, unknown sailors and the seagoing men of Rathlin lie side by side. For the Rathlin man loves the sea, and stories about the sea.
Oh, here you are, Joe. That should be something in your line, I think.
The rectory houses a branch of the local library. People call on the Reverend Butcher for many things beside books, but a clergyman in a little place has to advise and act on many problems and activities outside his parochial duties. The other clergyman on Rathlin is Father Stewart, curate in charge of the predominantly Roman Catholic community. His scattered congregation will be gathered in church tomorrow, for tomorrow is a feast day, and all is ready. Small, hard-working place that people put on their very best. But this is Corpus Christi Day. It is a holy day and a holiday. The children and their parents gather at the church to honor the institution of the sacrament of the body of Christ. The little procession comes from the church, but there'll be no onlookers, for all the congregation are part of the procession itself. They make the circuit of the parochial house, and the girl attendants strew the flowers gathered this morning before the monstrance. Acolytes bearing candles, the thurifer with his swinging censer, and the men of the island with a canopy shielding the host, move to the solemn strains of plain chant. Week by week, the churches bring people together. But there are other and less solemn occasions when the islanders set out to enjoy themselves. The tides may rip round Rathlin, but in the island itself are calm grey lochs like Ushett, where for generations men turn from the sea to match their craft against each other, and their legs and lungs against the speed of their own boats. It's 5 miles round Ushett Loch. When yachts carried 6-foot masts, the older men will tell you, you had to step lively or you'd be stretched in your back on the loch. They're smaller now and easier to handle, but it takes the same skill and energy as in the old days. to find yourself the winner of the cup. And in the pub this night, your cup will find its place beside the relic of a greater but ill-fated ship. The steam yacht, Her Majesty, wrecked like the Garvan at Bull Point. Pots, pans, and whiskey came ashore from the Garvan, and the pigs, they say, were drunk for weeks. But stout is the island's drink, and it's stout that Duncan Smith, the winner, is buying for the bar.
The cruise. Well, he's drove to play because he kept a few
No, that's in the trunk now, and he got home with him, and he can't
But McCoig's is more than a public bar. It's the council house of Rathlin. The talk could be of cattle or crops, a new boat or the hope of a new quay, of forestry, of fishing, of rabbits and why they are still increasing, of people and why they go away. The old man has seen them go, and in his time danced at the Cayleys where the island bid them farewell. The parochial hall drums to the beat of feet. The melody is transatlantic, but the steps are as old as the names of the people who dance them. The McQuilkins, McFalls, Andersons, and Craigs, the McCurdys, Blacks, and Smiths, the Currays, and McCoigs. Those who go away leave their own names behind. They leave behind the rough roads, the solitary cottage, the paraffin lamp, the storm-bound jetty, the isolation, and the hardships. But they also leave friends who walk familiar ways on Rathlin. The island betwixt and between an older pattern of life and the new days ahead.